Everyone, today we're going to start chapter 14 over the digestive system. Similar to the respiratory system, this one isn't a very long chapter, and a lot of words we have heard before. There is going to be some new terms, but today we're going to start covering the basic anatomy of the digestive system and the overall functions that the digestive system is able to do and what controls that. So let's go ahead and get started. I always start off with this picture that's at the beginning of every chapter to explain the what, how, and why. What system are we learning about? How is it able to complete its function? And why is it important to learn about it? So, the digestive system is the body system that breaks down any food that we eat into its basic nutrients that is needed for any kind of chemical processes in our body, such as making ATP for energy. Not only that, but it's also responsible for getting rid of any waste that it's not able to use in the form of feces. How is it able to do this? Well, it does this through two basic mechanisms: mechanically breaking down food by chewing it into smaller pieces, and then chemically breaking it down by using enzymes or other chemicals to break it into its nutrients. It then works with the cardiovascular system to transport those nutrients to the rest of the body. Why is it important? Well, the ability to break down nutrients allows our body to get the energy that is needed to maintain life. So, we're going to first start off with the anatomy of the digestive system, and we're going to talk about two main groups of organs. The first one is the alimentary canal. Sometimes it's called the gastrointestinal or the GI tract. Sometimes we call it our gut. It is a continuous coiled hollow tube. These organs take in food, break it into its nutrients, absorb those nutrients into the bloodstream, and then gets rid of any unwanted materials in the form of feces. While accessory digestive organs, these are going to aid digestion in some way, such as our teeth is going to mechanically break down food. Our tongue is able to move food around in our mouth. And then there are large digestive glands that are going to secrete different chemicals to help break down food. So I included this picture in your guys' notes. It's a very nice picture and explains and shows a lot of the alimentary canal and accessory organs. So we're going to start up here on the left. We have our mouth, also called our oral cavity, where we're going to put food into our mouth. And then our tongue is an accessory organ that allows us to be able to move that food around. In that mouth, we also have close by salivary glands, and there are three different ones, and these are going to release saliva. So this is an accessory organ that helps break down food. Food is then going to travel through our pharynx, which we learned about our pharynx in the respiratory chapter, and this is our throat. It's going to keep traveling down our esophagus all the way until it gets to our stomach. So our stomach is going to secrete stomach acid, and it's also going to churn or mix our food for further digestion. From there, it's going to go into our small intestine. So our small intestine is basically this inner part here. And you're going to see that we'll talk about how it's broke down into three major sections. From there, it goes from the small intestine to the large intestine. So here, the outside is the large intestine that wraps around it, all the way to get to the rectum and out the anus in the form of feces. Now, a couple other organs I kind of want to mention here that are accessory organs that we have not mentioned yet is our pancreas. So our pancreas is this yellow thing here. It's going to release pancreatic juices that helps break down food in the small intestine. We have our liver over here. So our liver helps produce bile to break down fat. And then our gallbladder is this little green thing down here. And when you dissect a pig, it does have a green tint. And this stores the bile that the liver makes. So as we just mentioned, there are those two major areas. So the alimentary canal organs are going to include things like the mouth, your pharynx, your esophagus, stomach, small and large intestine, and then your anus. And a fun fact about this is that food is technically considered outside the body as it moves through your GI tract. because the only thing it has contact with are the cells that line that tube. It doesn't actually come in contact with any of your internal organs. It's all external. The example they used in the textbook that we teach out of is if you got a donut from Casey's and it had a hole in the middle. If you stuck your finger through that hole, that's just open space. You're not actually sticking it in the donut. Accessory digestive organs, we can list them here. They're the teeth, salivary glands, technically your tongue as well, your pancreas, liver, and gallbladder. With that being said, of the anatomy, a couple other things with anatomy that we have to talk about is tissues, the layers that we're going to see. Everything we've learned about has layers of tissue. For example, our heart had our pericardium, our myocardia, our epicardia, and our endocardium. Our lungs had layers on them. These are going to be the layers for digestive organs. And notice that I'm going to talk about these from the innermost to the outermost layer. And these layers start at the esophagus all the way to the large intestine. Notice I underlined and bolded this because these layers are not in the mouth or the pharynx. The first layer we're going to talk about is the mucosa layer. This is our innermost moist membrane. This is going to secrete mucus that helps move food down through our digestive tract. The second layer is our submucosa layer, and this layer is going to contain a lot of blood vessels for us to be able to absorb those nutrients out of our digestive tract into our blood to be transported to other organs. It's also going to contain nerves and then lymphatic vessels. Our Muscularis Externa, so this sounds like muscle. This is where you're going to see a lot of your smooth muscle that is responsible for moving things through your digestive tract. It's going to alternate contracting to move things. And then your Serosa layer, this is the outermost layer, and it helps support those organs in the abdominal cavity. This picture I have taken from your textbook. It shows a lot of the different layers. So here it shows the very innermost layer is your mucosa. Then you get to your submucosa that has a lot of these different things. So if you look out over here, it's actually a better picture. If you ever see green, that's labeling lymphatic tissue. If you see yellow, that's labeling a nerve. And if you see red, that's usually generally an artery, and then blue are going to be your veins. The next layer is your Muscularis Externa. There are two muscle layers, and they alternate contracting. You have a longitudinal layer and a circular layer. And then the last one is your Serosa layer, or the outer one. Now, we have to be able to control our organs. And so the alimentary canal wall contains two intrinsic nerve plexuses that are part of the autonomic nervous system. This is something our body automatically does. We don't have to tell it to start digesting food. It does it by sensing stretch in organs and things like that. The two nerve plexuses that are responsible for things in our GI tract are our submucosal nerve plexus and our myenteric nerve plexus, and these help regulate the mobility and the secretory activity of the GI tract. And all that means is how fast food moves through our digestive tract and what chemicals are going to be released to help the breakdown of that food. Now that we've covered anatomy, we have to cover a little bit of the general physiology. We're going to cover 6 essential processes of the GI tract. The first one is ingestion. Ingestion is just the act of placing food in your mouth. So if you ingest something, you have placed it in your mouth and you're going to swallow it. Propulsion is the second one. Think of the word propel. If you propel yourself, you're moving yourself through water. So this is the movement of food from one part of your digestive system to another. So how does it get from your mouth all the way to your stomach? Well, there are 2 types of propulsion we're going to talk about. The first one is peristalsis. This is where we have alternating waves of contraction and relaxation. So our smooth muscle contracts and relaxes in order to squeeze and move food along our GI tract. This is involuntary. We do not have control over it, which is why the autonomic nervous system is responsible for it. The next one is segmentation, and this is located in the small intestine. Not only does it help propel food forward, but it also does it in a back and forth motion to help with the mixing of chemicals to help further break down food. So here's a picture of your peristaltic. You can see that it's going to squeeze, and it's going to squeeze it down. It's going to relax. It's going to keep squeezing, relax, squeeze it down, and essentially food will make its way through. The third major function is going to be mechanical breakdown. This is where we physically break down our food into smaller pieces, and we do so to increase the surface area. So that's important. If we increase the surface area, it allows the chemicals that are going to be secreted to do their job more effectively. So examples of mechanical breakdown are things like chewing our food with our teeth, mixing it in our mouth using our tongue. Our stomach is able to churn or move around our food. And then segmentation, that back and forth movement in our small intestine. Again, remember, mechanically breaking it down allows enzymes or chemicals to do their job better. The fourth one is digestion. After you kind of mechanically break it down, we have to attack it using enzymes or chemicals to break large molecules into their building blocks. So different food groups use different enzymes. So we're going to talk about a couple of them. And this one is going to be our first one, carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, these are just sugars. And carbohydrates can be broken down into something called monosaccharides. If you ever hear the word mono, that just means one. Saccharides means sugar. So we're going to take these complex carbohydrates or sugars and break them down into simple sugars. Now, there are different words that you should be familiar with, and all of them end in saccharides, so they have to do with sugar. You should pay attention to the first word. Poly means many. So these are many sugar chains together. These are complex sugars, things like starch. So starch is found in potatoes or a lot of pastas. This is usually what you eat when you're getting ready for game day because it does provide you with quite a bit of energy. Cellulose is also a starch or also a polysaccharide, but we cannot digest cellulose. Instead, we actually use it as fiber to help move things through our digestive tract. Disaccharide, di meaning two, so these are double sugars. These are things like sucrose or your table sugar, lactose, which is found in milk, and maltose. And then monosaccharides, these are our simple sugars, glucose. Glucose is why you often find that going into cellular respiration because it's already broken down, it's ready to be used. Fructose, that's found in a lot of fruits, and galactose. Now here, the next major group we're going to talk about is proteins. Proteins can be broken down into polypeptides and then further into amino acids. If you've taken biology class, you've learned how DNA gets changed into RNA. RNA then goes out to the ribosome, and it puts together amino acid chain called a polypeptide, and these eventually form proteins. Proteins are going to be found in things like nuts. Peanuts are very high in protein, eggs, things like that. The next major group is fats. We can break these down into fatty acids and glycerol. So here I've included these pictures. In your notes, there are 3 blanks, and it says, explain where each of the following start. So if we're looking at your notes, it's asking you, where does the breakdown of carbohydrates begins? Well, carbohydrates actually begin breaking down the moment you put things in your mouth. So you should be writing mouth in that blank. It starts by our saliva contains an enzyme called salivary amylase that breaks down carbohydrates. And then as it moves through the digestive tract, it's going to further be broken down. For example, a lot of it gets broken down in your small intestine. But I just need you to know it begins in the mouth. For proteins don't begin digestion in the mouth. They don't start until you reach the stomach. And it gets broken down by something called pepsin, which is released by your stomach. Proteins can be broken down into polypeptides and then eventually to amino acids. Again, it starts in your stomach and it gets finished in your small intestine. And then fats. So digestion of fats. This doesn't start in your stomach or your mouth. This doesn't get broken down until way later. It gets broken down in your small intestine, often from your liver releasing bile. And we're specifically talk about that more when we talk about the liver. Bile is very important for breaking down fats, and the gallbladder stores it. So if you've ever heard of somebody who's ever had their gallbladder removed, usually they have to go on a diet that's not high in fat. Moving on with our major functions, our fifth one is absorption. So now that we have broken down all of our things, we have to be able to take those nutrients and get them to the rest of the body. So they are absorbed into our blood, and this usually occurs mostly in our small intestine, and then they're moved to wherever they need to go. And then the last stage, defecation. This is anything that we didn't use, like fiber or cellulose, because we can't break that down. This is eliminated out of our GI tract through our anus in the form of feces or poop. And then we're going to end this by talking about how is all of this controlled. We have the anatomy, we have the function, the physiology. What controls it all? Well, it's controlled by your parasympathetic division of your autonomic nervous system. So remember your parasympathetic division, this is your resting and digesting system. This is what's going to happen when you're not stressed, you're not in that fight or flight response. You're able to relax and break down food. So this system actually responds to a number of stimuli. For example, the stretch of organs by food. When you eat, your stomach stretches out. It tells your body that you have food in there that needs to be broken down. pH of the contents. Whenever you drop things in your stomach, it's going to start releasing stomach acid. So your pH drops, and that is an indication to start breaking down food. Or even the presence of certain products. So I've noticed that a lot of bile's adjusted. Stimuli also can include things like smell. If you've ever been in a room and smelled something good, you can see that you start producing more saliva because your body is getting ready to eat that food. Now, these stimuli are going to cause glands to secrete digestive juices or hormones or chemicals to break down food. And it's also going to start telling your smooth muscle to start mixing and propelling food along your digestive tract. And then I really like this picture. I included it in your notes because it does show the 6 major stages of the digestive system, including a lot of the organs. So again, first thing is you have to ingest it into your mouth. It's going to travel through your pharynx. It shows that mechanical breakdown happens the moment you put it in your mouth through chewing. Also, your stomach churns food and your small intestine does it through segmentation. So that's a really nice review of mechanical breakdown. It goes through your esophagus, and then over here it talks about propelling food. So swallowing is a form of propulsion, peristalsis, things like that. Here it gets down to the stomach, and it shows little circles showing that it's going to be mixed in your stomach. And then it shows digestion. So along the way, everything's being digested. And then it gets over here and it shows arrows. It shows all this food in your small intestine is going to get absorbed in your blood vessels. And then down here, it's showing that all of this is going to eventually be formed feces where defecation takes place. And that's the end of today's lesson. If you have any questions, please just make sure you ask. We do go through this chapter relatively quickly. So if you're getting lost on anything, you have to make sure that you guys come in for help. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a great day.